Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today's review we are taking a look at the Tactic from Discmania. Let's go ahead, jump into this review first by taking a look at the profile. Now, first thing you'll notice is that being a Speed 4, the Tactic does have a pretty blunt nose to it, and overall has a very flat flight plate, especially in the meta plastic and also the baseline plastics. Neo is pretty flat, but I did have some that had a little bit of a small raise in the very middle of the flight plate. Also was seen in the Razor Claw 2. However, Razor Claw 3, that one was very flat, so you can definitely find the Tactic that fits your grip, whether it's something that has a little bit of a small dome to it to fill the hand better, or if you like something a little bit flatter for forehanding shots. It is worth noting that the Tactic is not the slimmest profile approach disc. Even with that flat flight plate, it still has a little bit of depth to it. Let's go ahead, switch gears over to the flight, first taking a look at the flight numbers. Tactic is again Speed 4, Glide 2, Turn 0, and a Fade of 3, which by the numbers makes the Tactic a very dependable, overstable approach option. And at slow speeds, you're going to see that is definitely true. I don't have the biggest arm, definitely I'd say slower to getting to medium arm speed. And overall, the Tactic is a very overstable approach option, very dependable. When I even rip into it extremely hard, both backhand and forehand, it rides incredibly straight until it gets to the point where it starts to slow down, and then it just has a very dumpy finish. It doesn't have any kind of panning turn. It just absolutely stays straight and then dumps. And even when I do start throwing it on an Anheuser angle, even on exaggerated Anheuser angles, it really doesn't like to hold those Anheisers for very long. It auto corrects itself, flattens itself out, and then depending on how much angle you give it, it either fights out all the way into that hyzer finish, or if you give it that extreme angle, then it kind of will have more of like an elevator drop to the ground. It's also worth noting the Tactic does not have very much glide whatsoever, so this is not the kind of disc that you're going to be blowing past the basket. So on approaches, you are going to want to give the Tactic a little bit of height, because if you do throw it low, gravity is really going to kick in and just pull the disc down to the ground. So you're going to want to make sure that you don't have much of a ceiling to worry about on those approach shots. However, if you do get it up in the air, it will glide a little bit, but again, you're not going to be blowing past the basket in any way, shape, or form. It is going to want to get to the ground very quickly, and as mentioned, you're going to want to hold it out wide a little bit on approaches, depending on how much angle you give it, because this is a very dumpy approach disc that is going to hyzer out extremely quickly. Along with that late flight overstability, the Tactic has pretty good torque resistance in the earlier part of the flight, which makes it very good for forehanding approach shots as well. Even when you throw it with a little bit of an Anheuser, you may get that little panning turn, but you know what? It's still going to come back very quickly. But let's go ahead and see the Tactic out on the course, and this is just a simple lefty hyzer. Just throw the Tactic out wide. It is going to hold that angle the entire way, no even inkling of flipping up. It just holds that arcing hyzer and that very hard finish. This next shot is very similar, just tighter. You do have gaps on both the left or right hand side, so depending lefty or righty, or backhand or forehand, you do have options. And even just as, say, like a touch shot, you can see that the Tactic does very well on just those touch approaches off the tee. This, I'm going to opt for the forehand because there's so much space off the tee on that right hand side and very little danger. Thrown with a little bit of an Anheuser to get a little more distance on it. You saw it held the turn a little bit, but it still fights back to the basket. Just don't have to worry about this thing fighting out of any kind of turn or angle. And with putting, I mean, the Tactic is not going to be an everyday putter. It drops out of the sky very quickly because it has no glide, but it stays relatively straight until you get outside the circle before it has a very dumpy finish. It is perfect for those headwind putts. And when it comes to different plastic types, whew, Tactic comes in a lot of them, both in baseline and premium plastics, including soft and stiff, so you can really find the ones that work best for your game. Overall, I do find that the Tactic in kind of like the meta, like the Razor Claw 3, is going to be one of your most overstable options. This thing is an absolute hog. Even on forehand, I can barely get this thing to have any kind of turn. It just goes very straight and extremely dumpy finish. Versus then once you get to the baseline plastics, they're a little bit straighter, a little bit more workable. The XO Hard still right out of the box flies very similar to a fresh Neo, but I will say it maybe holds straighter a little bit longer before it starts to dump. And then you have the extra soft for those of you who like to throw it on cold days or just like really soft gummy discs. It's not going to have as much skip as the other plastics, and surprisingly it holds torque extremely well, so it is going to fly out of the box the same way that you would expect a Tactic to fly. However, it is going to beat in very quickly. So let's go ahead, take a look at the flight of the different plastic types and just going to see if we can notice any differences. The Neo again rides straight for about 3/4 of the flight before then it slows down and has a very dumpy finish. In the Meta Plastic, the Razor Claw 3, it flies straight for about 50% of its flight before it gets on that hyzer angle and just really likes to crash. The XO Hard, very similar to the Neo, maybe just a little bit straighter, and then still that very predictable finish. And surprisingly enough, the XO Soft, very overstable. It really held that overstability more than I thought it would. I thought it would be a lot straighter and probably the straightest out of the box. No, it was actually almost more overstable than the XO Hard. It just, as soon as it left my hand, it went straight and then kind of more followed the meta where it just absolutely wanted to get to the ground. However, XO Hard and the Soft, those are going to break in very quickly to very straight flyers. So if you're looking to maybe bag a couple of different tactics, the Extra Soft, the XO Hard, those are going to break in very quick to most likely very straight flyers, even if you are a slower arm, and probably out of the box will be straight flyers for those bigger arms. But it is going to be a great counterpart to either the Neo or the Meta, again depending on your arm speed. Slower arms, reach for the Neo. Faster arms, reach for the Meta. And then for the more straighter approaches that you still need that dependable late finish, once you kind of season in those XO Hard or the Extra Softs, they're all going to go really well with each other. I could definitely see, if you are a lover of the Tactic and love the feel in your hand, I could definitely see you bagging one of the baselines and one of the premiums. Overall, there are a lot of overstable approach discs out on the market, and I do apologize that I did not pit any of those against the Tactic to kind of show the comparison. That could be a video down the road. But from my experience, the closest Tactic that resembles, say, a Discraft Zone is going to be the Meta or the Razor Claw 3. That is very reminiscent to me of a Discraft Zone. And then if you're wanting something a little bit straighter, I think the Neo and the XO Hard very closely resemble, say, the Tempo, the newly released Tempo from Axiom Discs. Something that's going to hold straighter longer, not dump nearly as quickly, but then also more workable for those slower to medium arm speeds. Overall, the Tactic is a fine overstable approach disc. It's very dependable, it's not groundbreaking, but it still does the job extremely well, and it comes in a lot of different plastics, so whether you're a slower arm, a faster arm, like stiffer plastic, or gummier, you're going to be able to find the Tactic that works best for you. However, for myself, I do have those baby hands, so the semi-deep profile doesn't quite work for me, but for you with larger hands, you'll find this to work just fine. Till the next one, everyone, keep banging chains.